Good morning. Welcome to a special edition of Breakfast on BBC News.
A nation mourns following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Her Majesty died yesterday at Balmoral, bringing to an end a 70-year reign.
The Queen's eldest son, now King Charles III, was at her bedside. He'll return to London later today.
Tributes have been paid from around the world as hundreds of mourners gather at Buckingham Palace.
It's Friday, the 9th of September. You're watching a special edition of BBC Breakfast following the death of Her Majesty the Queen.
Britain's longest-serving monarch passed away yesterday at age 96 at Balmoral Castle, the Scottish retreat which Her Majesty had visited since she was a girl.
The news was confirmed in a statement from the palace at 6:30 p.m. after the Queen's 4 children, including the new King, Charles III, had travelled to Balmoral.
On today's programme, we'll be remembering Her Majesty's life and legacy and speaking to those who knew and loved her.
We'll bring you the latest reaction from Balmoral to Buckingham Palace and across the Commonwealth. First, our royal correspondent, Daniela Ralph, has been looking back at the final days and weeks of the Queen's life.
The final images we have, Queen Elizabeth II still carrying out duties into her final days. On Tuesday, at Balmoral, she welcomed the new Prime Minister. These photos, the record of her last official engagement, bringing to an end 7 decades of service. Yesterday afternoon at Aberdeen Airport, several senior members of the royal family arrived to be with the Queen. The Duke of Cambridge drove the Duke of York and Earl and Countess of Wessex to Balmoral. Prince Charles, the new King, was already there with his wife and his sister, Princess Anne. Harry, the Duke of Sussex, arrived separately later in the evening. Here in the UK this week with his wife for a number of charity events, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, did not accompany him to Scotland. At 6:30, in a statement of just 26 words, Buckingham Palace announced the Queen had died peacefully earlier in the afternoon. As is tradition, the statement was attached to the palace gates by 2 footmen, as tribute to Britain's longest reigning monarch began.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
And heartfelt words too from the leader of the opposition.
For the vast majority of us, the late Queen has been simply the Queen, the only Queen, above all else, our Queen. As we mourn her loss, we should also treasure her life, our longest serving and greatest ever monarch. Above the clashes of politics, she stood not for what the nation fought over, but what it agreed upon.
Cheered by onlookers, one of the Queen's last royal engagements was in July, with her daughter Princess Anne opening a new state-of-the-art hospice in Berkshire. But these kinds of visits had become rare over the past year, as the Queen relied on her walking stick, her mobility compromised. The royal household had tried to adapt to keep her active and visible. A golf buggy at the Chelsea Flower Show helped the Queen stay comfortable. But she had become noticeably thinner and frailer, something that severely limited her involvement in her own Platinum Jubilee. Although her sense of fun as part of those celebrations was undiminished.
Perhaps you would like a marmalade sandwich. I always keep one for emergencies.
So do I. I keep mine in here.
birthday jubilee, ma'am. And thank you for everything.
That's very kind.
Now, as we remember and reflect, the royal family enters a period of mourning. A state funeral is expected within the next 2 weeks. It will be a period of time when aspects of national life are put on hold. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
Thousands of people went to Buckingham Palace yesterday to lay flowers and pay tribute. More are expected today. Our correspondent Jane Hill is there for us this morning. Jane, still dark, but still lots of people there paying their respects. What's the atmosphere like there?
Naga, yes, good morning from Buckingham Palace. So much quieter, as you would expect, than it was last night when we saw thousands and thousands of people come here to pay their respects, to try to take in the news as the news started to filter through. Still very early in the morning here, but Buckingham Palace with the flag at half-mast. It is the symbol of the royal family, isn't it, in this country? The Queen, of course, who died at Balmoral, who loved Balmoral, who loved her home in Aberdeenshire. But for so many people, it is inevitably Buckingham Palace, which is perhaps what comes to mind when you think of the British royal family. And so, just as we did last night, we expect to see many, many people gathering here today. Not so many right now, just this early in the morning, as you might expect. There's a few early morning runners and cyclists making their way down the Mall around the memorial here, and they are, I notice, stopping, pausing at the gates of the palace behind me, just looking through the gates, thinking perhaps about this new day as the UK wakes up for its first full day with a new monarch. But as you suggest, thousands of people came here last night as that news started to emerge. Tim Muffet has more on that.
An event we all knew would come one day. But for so many, one that is so profoundly sad.
It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking.
What did she mean to you?
The Queen means everything to me like my mum means to me. She was a fantastic lady. She'll always be a fantastic lady. She'll always be a part of my life forever. And I'll never forget her.
She meant a lot to me. For someone my age, I've got quite old grandparents who were born in the 1917 and 22, so she was part of their lives too. So talking to them, they knew her growing up, and it takes a thread back to that sort of era. And now I hear people talking about a king and a coronation, and it puts conversations I had with them in my head of when they would talk about a king, a coronation. So it feels very strange to have this person that's been the head of everything in my life go.
The McGrath family are from Dublin and are on holiday in London.
Well, our two countries have been so close over so many centuries, and we've had a tough past, but it goes without saying that she was an iconic woman and a role model for women of all ages and all colours and beliefs. And my mum has been a fan of the Queen for so many years. She was a fan of her integrity, and she's very sad. Yeah, we shed a tear today.
Throughout her reign, Queen Elizabeth II was unwavering in her dedication to her role as monarch. And for so many people here tonight, it is vital to honour and respect the role she played in our national story.
It's very important. The Queen has done so much for us for the past 70 years, and I think that it's our kind of duty as the British people and just generally to show our respect to someone who served us for 70 years.
She means a family. Like since my boyhood, childhood, while I was in Bangladesh, I saw her through the TV. I really do feel emotional. And as a Muslim, I prayed for her after my prayer today.
We all knew this day would come one day.
Yeah.
And yet it still feels shocking and it still feels profound, doesn't it?
Yes.
How are you feeling?
I think she's a kind of mother figure to everyone, and she was so, I can't really put it into words. As a nation, we're mourning the loss of the Queen, but for the King and his family, they have lost their mum, their grandmother, their great-grandmother, and so that's really sad for them. We have to remember that she was their family.
The reign of King Charles III has begun. But for many, the reign of Queen Elizabeth II will never be forgotten. Tim Muffet, BBC News, at Buckingham Palace.
And here this morning, as I look at the palace behind me, you can see those rows and rows of flowers, memories, notes that people have left. We wait to see what the day brings here at the palace, but I think it's fair to expect that we will see the numbers here again today that Tim was talking about last night. Right here early morning at the palace, it's actually relatively noisy because what's going on is barriers being put out, scaffolding being erected, and that is a sign of what is to come over the next 10 days or so. Crowds expected here at the palace, and of course the ceremony and the formalities that will unfold over the next 10 days. And so the preparations for all of that is very much underway at the moment. And there are still many details that we don't yet know, of course. But we will be here throughout the morning here at Buckingham Palace, and we expect to see people arriving. There's a smattering of people at the gates, and people peering through all the time and soaking in the news that came through yesterday evening. We'll have more from here at the palace to come. For now, Naga, Charlie, back to you.
Jane, thanks very much. Jane Hill there.
Our royal correspondent, Sarah Campbell, is at Balmoral for us this morning. Good morning to you, Sarah. So, of course, the royal family gathered there, including King Charles III. What do we know about events today and their movements?
Yes, good morning to you from a rather rainy Balmoral. You can see the tributes behind me, which were left yesterday, the gates leading up to Balmoral Castle, and one can only really imagine the sadness that there has been inside those castle walls over the last evening, not just for the staff who will have worked with the Queen for many, many years, but also, of course, her family, who, as you say, rushed to be here yesterday because, apart from being a global figure, and there have been tributes flooding in from around the world, she was, of course, to them a mother and a grandmother. And really their movements here were the first sign yesterday that something really was seriously wrong. So the new king, King Charles, he arrived here. Of course, at that point he was Prince Charles. The Duchess of Cornwall also spent the night here at Balmoral, as well as her other three children, so the Duke of York, Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, and Prince Edward, along with his wife, the Countess of Wessex, and her two grandchildren, Prince William, who's now heir to the throne, and Prince Harry. They've all spent the evening inside Balmoral. And I think a sign as well with the change of monarchy that the new king, King Charles III, issued a statement quickly, because of course he now takes on the role that his mother performed for more than 70 years, and his statement really giving this sense of personal loss. He said, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of great sadness for me and all members of my family." And as much as he will have had time to grieve, he must now get on with his new role. So we expect that he and the new Queen Consort will leave here at Balmoral probably later this morning. He will have tasks to perform. He will have his first audience with the new Prime Minister, Prime Minister Truss. He will have to go through the details for the period of mourning that will now be undertaken, for the funeral arrangements, which will have been long planned but will need to be signed off and finalised by him. And at some point later today, we do expect him to address the nation, to, as I say, take on that role that his mother has performed so flawlessly all these years, being some sense of comfort and reassurance to the nation. In a wider picture, in terms of what's going to happen today, the period of mourning has started. We will expect to hear bells being tolled at the big cathedrals and churches across the UK. We will expect flags to be at half-mast, gun salutes to happen in the royal parks. And all of our lives will be touched in some way. Big events may be cancelled, sporting, cultural events may be cancelled over the next 10 days or postponed. And books of condolence will be opened in local halls, in town halls. The royal website already has an online book of condolence for the many thousands, if not millions of people, I'm sure, who'll want to leave their own thoughts after the passing yesterday of Queen Elizabeth II.
Sarah, I understand the Queen had often described Balmoral, where you are, as the place where she was most happy. And I know people there were very familiar with her coming and going over so many years.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful part of the world for anyone who's been here. Royal Deeside. It's got thousands of acres on the estate. It was an estate bought by Prince Albert for Queen Victoria a long time ago. But the Queen has spent so many happy summers here. She would normally travel here in July, stay here until sort of late September, early October. And it was really a place that she could get away from it all. She could spend time with family, she could have visitors, she could entertain. We know that she cherished her time here. The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, said yesterday that she hoped it would be of some comfort to her family, that they know she would have spent her final days in a place that she truly loved. And as you say, people here really thought of her as part of their community, just as I say in her other residences, like in Windsor, people say the same. So they will have felt this quite personally. Crathy Kirk, which is just over there, she was a member of the congregation, and she would have really been missed here. And I think that was reflected in the people that came and laid tributes and spoke about her yesterday.
Sarah, for the moment, thank you very much. We're going to hear now from some.
It's history, and we just wanted to be here to share our condolences to just be part of it, kind of thing. Yeah.
It's really sad news to hear. Actually, it's that's the reason we came. We were hoping to pass on our regards, or just to be here. So it's kind of sad, actually.
A sad day. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for everybody, I think. I think the whole nation will come together and just, feel the same. Yeah.
Although you never knew her or anything, but her significance was just incredible. And it doesn't really hit home, I don't think, until you hear something like this, and what she meant to us and what she meant to the country. It was an absolutely incredible legacy.
Some thoughts here from the people who live around and about Balmoral, as they're saying, feeling that they have lost a member of their community and feeling that they wanted to come here and just share their thoughts, as we've seen at Buckingham Palace, at Windsor, at Holyrood, at all those sort of big places within the UK that have been so linked to the Queen over this last 70 years, and where people now feel that they just want to go to and just want to share their thoughts and be together.
And Sarah, of course, you're in darkness now, but I would imagine, like a lot of the other royal palaces and places connected with the Queen, they will be expecting many people to pay their tributes. We've seen flowers laid in many places already.
Yes, absolutely. No public here this morning. As you say, it's still dark here, although it is starting to get light here this morning. It doesn't feel too quiet because on either side of me I am surrounded by television crews from around the world who've been broadcasting through the night and will continue to broadcast a reflection of the fact that the Queen was not only a figure of great importance to Britain but also around the world, and that's certainly been reflected, I think, hasn't it, in the tributes which have been coming from all corners of the globe, not just the Commonwealth but countries where she wasn't a head of state, but all of these people respectful, understanding and acknowledging the fact that Britain today has lost a figure who has been a global figure for 7 decades, and that is a huge loss to this country, but a huge loss much further afield as well.
Sarah, for the moment, thank you.
Her Majesty died just 2 days after officially inviting Liz Truss to become Prime Minister. Now, one of her first duties is to lead the UK through this period of mourning.
15 Prime Ministers served during the Queen's 70-year reign. Some of them, and the UK's current political leaders, have been paying tribute, as Leila Nathu now reports.
Flags being lowered to half-mast at Downing Street.
former residents paid tribute to the Queen, who'd asked them to form a government.
The example, the duty, the selflessness, the way in which other people were put first, the way in which she handled crises with great stoicism when they occurred, as they occurred a number of times during her reign. They were all examples to people about how to behave in their own lives and examples for our country.
Her longest serving Prime Minister, Sir Tony Blair, said, "We have lost not just our monarch, but the matriarch of our nation, the figure who more than any other brought our country together, kept us in touch with our better nature, personified everything which makes us proud to be British." Gordon Brown took over the Labour government in 2007. He reflected tonight on the impression the Queen made around the world.
Everywhere I went, Her Majesty was respected, she was admired, she was revered, and we will miss her greatly. There is no monarch who has served so long with such popularity and held in such high esteem and dedicated ourselves so much to the future of our country.
David Cameron returned the Conservatives to power in 2010. He said of the Queen, "There can be no finer example of dignified public duty and unstinting service," saying, "We all owe our sincere gratitude for her continued devotion. I was fortunate to have been able to call on the knowledge of the world's greatest public servant and indeed the world's most experienced diplomat." In 2016, the Queen appointed Theresa May as Britain's second female Prime Minister.
I was fortunate enough to be able to meet her in different circumstances, including in the weekly audiences, but also at Balmoral, and saw a more relaxed Queen. But I think we are all mourning the fact that somebody who was a constant in our lives has now passed away.
It was just days ago that the Queen accepted the resignation of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Tonight, he said, "We think of her deep wisdom and historic understanding, and her seemingly inexhaustible but understated sense of duty. This is our country's saddest day, because she had a unique and simple power to make us happy. That is why we loved her." There was a sombre mood among politicians in Westminster and around the country.
The Queen was an ever-fixed mark in our lives. The world changed around us, politicians came and went. The Queen was our nation's constant. The Queen represented duty and courage, as well as warmth and compassion. The Queen was a living reminder of our collective past, of our greatest generation, and the sacrifices made for our freedom today.
Scotland loved, respected and admired her. And by all accounts, Her Majesty was rarely happier than when she was here in Scotland at her beloved Balmoral, a fact I have been privileged to observe personally. I hope it will be a source of comfort to her family that she spent her final days in a place that she loved so much.
On behalf of the Welsh Government and people in all parts of Wales, I offer our deepest condolences to all Her Majesty's children and their families on this sad occasion. She will be sorely missed by the many organisations in Wales she championed and supported over so many decades as patron or as president.
MPs have been accustomed to the Queen setting out government priorities in Parliament. They will begin paying their tributes in the Commons. Leila Nathu, BBC News.
Well, it's just 3 months since the UK enjoyed a 4-day weekend to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, marking her 70 years on the throne.
There were street parties, parades, a red arrows fly past, a rock concert at Buckingham Palace, and, of course, that unforgettable sketch with Paddington Bear. Sarah Campbell has been taking a look.
The sun shone and crowds filled the Mall. For 4 days in June, the message could not have been clearer.
God save the Queen! Concrete jungle where trees are made of.
A galaxy of rock royalty, and the British people in their thousands celebrating a reign etched so deeply in our memories.
Your Majesty, Mummy, you have been there for us for these 70 years. These pictures on your house are the story of your life and ours.
And listen to the reaction of this delighted and grateful crowd.
The Queen's appearances were brief but unforgettable.
Oh, that's wonderful.
On the first day, her delight both at the sight and sound of so many people and the antics of her great-grandson were obvious. That evening, Her Majesty lit the first of a giant chain of beacons, symbols of hope in 2,500 towns and cities from Shetland to Australia and New Zealand.
What a wonderful sound those bells can be heard all over the City of London.
The next morning, the bells of St Paul's marked the national service of Thanksgiving, the surrounding pavements packed with well-wishers.
We'll never see this again in our lifetime, so it's really a special day for us, yeah.
Absolutely magical atmosphere. We're enjoying every second.
This was the largest gathering of royals since before the pandemic. Almost all the members of her family were there, but not the Queen. She was unable to attend in person, but watched the service from home.
Thank you for showing us how service and faithfulness matter.
This is English champagne, especially for the Queen.
The thank yous continued at tens of thousands of Jubilee lunches, bringing communities together, something the Queen had done throughout her reign.
We talk about it, love, love, love. We talk about it, love.
At the Platinum Party at the Palace, a lineup of legends. Each with their own memory of Britain's longest reign.
And I've grown up with this woman. You know, I was 7 when she came to the throne. So she's always been part of my life.
Around the Olympics, she was absolutely essential. When some of the selection panel come through the city, she hosted them at Buckingham Palace on a Friday night and even appeared on the balcony and waved them goodbye. So it sort of put Paris and Madrid in its place.
Yes. I do hope you're having a lovely Jubilee.
To those memories, she added
tea?
2 more.
Oh, yes, please.
Stealing the show with Paddington.
A wave from Her Majesty to acknowledge the wave of love that is surely coming across that balcony and sweeping its way through the palace.
And bringing events to a close on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, surrounded by her family, including her 3 heirs. A wonderful 4-day party was officially over. But what a platinum jubilee it had been.
Wonderful moments there from the Jubilee celebrations.
Let's just take you to Buckingham Palace this morning. You can see the tributes laid outside the gates of the palace. Yesterday evening, we saw hundreds gathering to pay tribute, to pay their respects to Her Majesty the Queen, the announcement of her passing yesterday early evening. And this morning, many more are expected to gather and just pay their respects, nod to Her Majesty, acknowledge her reign, her 70-year reign.
One of the things we're going to be doing for you as we stay on these pictures of Buckingham Palace, of course, dawn just breaking over London this morning. One of the things we're going to take the chance to do is talk to people who have turned out at Buckingham Palace, because it's really interesting this morning hearing the stories of the reasons why the Queen meant so much across generations and nationalities. Many people from all over the world are amongst those who are paying their respects today. So this, the image of Buckingham Palace this morning.
The time in the UK is coming up to 6:30. For viewers now in the UK, it's time to find out what's happening in terms of news, travel and weather, wherever you are.
Time now is 6:30. Let's have a look at some of the front pages of all the major UK newspapers, all of them, of course, leading with tributes to Her Majesty today.
We'll start with the Daily Telegraph, which reprints the Queen's own message of condolence to the families of the victims of the 9/11 attacks. Grief is the price we pay for love. US President Joe Biden referenced the comment in his tribute and recalled how she stood in solidarity with the United States in its darkest days.
Let's see the front page of the Daily Mirror, and a very simple front page there, just with the words, thank you. And what you realise as you look at all through the papers, maybe have a look at some of the inside pages as well this morning, there are so many beautiful images of the Queen, and often newspapers, it is glorious to spend time just looking at the pictures that have come throughout the years, the many, many years of her reign.
The Daily Mail says our hearts are broken, with a portrait of the Queen from 1952 while she was Princess Elizabeth. How to find the words? The paper's columnist Sarah Vine asks. Our grief is 100 different emotions, all of them hard to grasp.
Interesting, the different times the newspapers have chosen to celebrate this morning. This is the front page of The Guardian, which features a portrait from the Queen's coronation.
And of course, there's been huge reaction from around the world to the news of the Queen's death. Tributes have appeared on the front pages of newspapers in the Commonwealth. The Daily Nation in Kenya says the Queen was one of the world's most respected figures, and that her death brings to an end one of the longest reigns by any head of state in the world.
Very much part of what we're trying to do is give you a sense of how the Queen is being remembered all over the world. And this is the front page from Australia. The Herald Sun featuring, this is a much more recent picture of the Queen. Picture, one of those radiant smile pictures, probably one of the images people will remember best. And a very simple headline there, the word irreplaceable.
And as we were saying, many of the papers taking a look back at the Queen's life. And this is just one example here in the Sun. And it's, for so many people today, the Queen is all they've known as a monarch here in the UK for the whole of their lives. And it's always interesting to just look at the pictures over the years. So what the Sun has done is taken every one of her 96 years from birth in the cot, 1926, to one of her most recent pictures in 1922. And as you say, Charlie, it's fascinating to look back and just remember certain images, beautiful images that have marked so many key periods here in the UK.
You're watching BBC News. Time now is 6:33.
You're watching a special edition of BBC Breakfast, remembering the life and legacy of Her Majesty the Queen, who died yesterday at the age of 96.
We will be bringing you reaction this morning from those who knew Her Majesty, those who worked with her and shared the same interests in the charities she supported, the sports she loved, and the Commonwealth, which was so important to her.
We'll try to bring you and give you an idea of how the coming days will play out. The UK is mourning its longest-serving monarch. Also, though, preparations have begun to officially welcome the new king, Charles III.
Yes, the other thing we'll show you is what is happening this morning as people across the Commonwealth and the UK come together to express their sorrow and pay tribute.
Now, our correspondent Jane Hill is at Buckingham Palace this morning. And Jane, seeing you now, of course, we were just seeing pictures there of the palace, dawn breaking over London. And such a contrast, isn't there? Such a contrast when you think of the joy of the celebrations of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. And just going back to last night, where you saw people gathering And Buckingham Palace, of course, a focal point for the nation's grief.
Yes, that shift in just a few months, and it was the most beautiful weekend for the most part, wasn't it, Nagan? That 4-day weekend, we were here, we saw Trooping the Colour, we saw the party at the palace. The sun shone for the first couple of days. It really was beautiful. And as we've been reflecting so many times, how much the tens of thousands of people then gathered here cheered when the Queen appeared on the balcony behind me. This morning here at Buckingham Palace, still very early in the morning, but I'm struck by actually, even just in the last half an hour since I last spoke to you, the number of people who are here. Not huge numbers, of course, it is 6:30 in the morning, but there are dozens and dozens of people. And people run round this area, they cycle down the Mall, they cycle around the palace, and a lot of those people stopping at the gates behind me, pausing, perhaps looking at the official sign that was put up confirming the death of Her Majesty yesterday, and looking at the many, many flowers that are already there along the gates. And I think we can expect many, many more people here today, and certainly the authorities, it would appear, are expecting very large crowds. It's relatively noisy here at the palace simply because they are putting up the barriers and erecting scaffolding and preparing for the sort of crowds that are likely to be here in the coming days. Let's cross over to our colleague John Maguire, because he's been talking to people, and I think he's not too far away from me and has been looking at some of the flowers and tributes that people have been leaving as well. I'm hoping that we can talk to John now. John, are you speaking to people? What can you tell us where you are?
Jane, morning. At the gates of Buckingham Palace and all the way along the frontage of the palace that's so familiar from television pictures that you see at state occasions. Well, we were all here, weren't we, just a few weeks ago for the Platinum Jubilee. In a funny kind of way, there's a very similar atmosphere here today. I think, of course, that was all about joy. It's a sad day, there's a really sad feeling here today, but I think that sense of paying tribute to the Queen remains today, and many people have come here to do so. Been chatting to folks in the crowd. Let me just introduce you to the Knight family here, who are going to tell us, morning all, who are going to tell us about their morning so far, because you've had an early start, obviously.
Yeah.
Tell us what you've done and why.
Up about 4 o'clock this morning to get the 5 a.m. train with friends here. Just almost wanted to come up last night. Just that feeling of, wanting to be here and pay our respects, really. So, but Vicky said she was coming up at 5 a.m, so I thought I'll tag along, jump on, be an honorary knight for the day.
And Vicky, she'll be the only monarch that you've ever known, that I've ever known. Important for you today to come. Why?
My parents have known, my grandparents have known. She's been a stability of our country, really. It's just utterly heartbreaking to see the Union flag at half-mast, and I don't know really, I just feel that they need to come and pay our respects, so
There are lots of people here today, crews from around the world, television crews, lots of different journalists, people passing by on their way to work with some sort of curiosity. You've made that special journey. You're Australian originally, Christine.
Originally, yes. Been here for 35 years.
Yeah, right.
Just became
right. So you've always had the Queen in your life.
Absolutely, always been there, and I know. Royalist, not royalist, it's actually irrelevant. She's just this amazing woman. And we were saying earlier about the whole James Bond Paddington Bear thing and how she changed with the times, how she wouldn't have done that kind of stuff maybe 50 years ago, but moved along and did it, and always so beautifully and tastefully and so wonderful. So, and she's never going to be on that balcony again is, pretty sad. My daughter said to me yesterday that her children will never know a queen, and that's, they'll only ever know a king, and I feel like that's a loss for them, to have never known her, so,
And do you feel that Elizabeth as a person, she seemed to even transcend her role as the monarch, as the Queen, as the head of the Commonwealth?
Absolutely. You can't look up to anybody quite like her, really. It's just I don't really have words, I'm afraid. It's just
that thing wherever you go travelling, everyone says to you, "Oh, where are you from?" England. "Oh, do you know the Queen?" Like, you know, it's that thing, isn't it?
Like
that,
she's on the tube.
Exactly, of course. So, but we all did feel like we knew her, didn't we? So
You had that personal connection, as strange as it may seem.
Yeah,
perhaps.
And even in her last sort of smile with that picture that she had on Tuesday, that cheeky little grin, that's the bit that's going to live on, isn't it? I suppose.
That's it, isn't it? That she was working. She was working, you know, and right to the end. That she did. Literally.
The James Bond and the Paddington, and we gather a great sense of humour.
Absolutely. She was a special lady. Yeah, aside from being the Queen, or because she was the Queen, I don't know, but she just was a very special person, and I think all little girls should look up to her.
And Lila, you've come here very early this morning to make sure that we can come here before Lila goes to school?
Yeah, so we got up at 4 o'clock with the aim to get here, lay our flowers. Lila's written a letter to His Majesty the King and to send her love to the family, and we wanted to come up and personally deliver it.
Lila, what did you write? Can you remember?
I'm very sorry about your mum dying, I think it was.
Very sorry about your
We
mum.
will miss you very much. Lots of love to the royal family.
That's beautiful. I think, well, hopefully he gets to hear about that. I'm sure that sentiment will be very well received. Thank you, folks. Thanks very much for spending some time with us this morning. We'll let you have a quiet moment and reflect. I know as you were before we burst in, but nice to see you this morning. Let's just go and see a couple of other people. Actually, they're just being interviewed by another crew, as you can see this morning. Nice hug there for the family that we were just talking to. Crowds are building, as I say, people coming and coming into work, Jane, this morning. All of the floral tributes lining all the way along the front of the gates of Buckingham Palace now. Many people not quite knowing why they've come in a funny kind of way, but knowing that they wanted to mark this moment in history, as we were just saying. For most of us here, most of you watching at home this morning, she'll be the only monarch that we've ever known. Of course, we now have King Charles, so we'll get used to a new monarch, a king for the first time in many of our lifetimes. The crowds will build here, I'm sure of it, as I say. So similar in a funny kind of way to the celebrations from just a couple of months ago, but with, of course, one key difference. You were here too, Naga, weren't you? Just across the way there at Canada Gate. Special days. This is a special day too, but as I say, entirely different reasons. Back to you in the studio.
John, I was there and we worked together, didn't we, celebrating Her Majesty's Jubilee. And I think one thing that surprised us both, and again, I don't know why it surprises me now, just that the breadth of generations paying their tribute today, from young to old. It didn't matter what age you were. You didn't have to be a traditionalist to appreciate Her Majesty.
That's absolutely right. I think we, young and old, as you say, she meant so much. Is she the nation's mother? Is she the nation's grandmother? The nation's great-grandmother for so many people. Young Lila there would be the same age as some of the Queen's great-grandchildren. But clearly meant a lot to a lot of people. I think, as Graham was just saying, he'd never met her. Seemed like a very distant figure in a funny kind of way with a very different life. But there was that personal connection, and that's what's being reflected by the people we're talking to here this morning.
John, thanks very much. I think one of the things poignant there was that young girl saying that her children, that young girl, when she has children, will only ever know kings in the future, and that to have a queen has been such a rare thing and such a privilege.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go to Windsor Castle now. Our correspondent Duncan Kennedy is there. And Duncan, it's really interesting. We're getting our first chance, really, this morning to talk to people. And I know over the years, crowds have always gone to Windsor Castle at major occasions, often big celebrations. Tell us a little bit about how it feels at Windsor Castle this morning.
Well, I think the word to use, really, good morning, Charlie, is just people are bewildered. Yesterday we had a queen, today we have a king. There's not only that physical change in the nation's infrastructure, there's the psychological one as well. And I think people are just waking up to that, literally and figuratively, here in Windsor this morning. It was, of course, the place that she really loved, where John was there at Buckingham Palace, is referred to as the office home. Here, perhaps, it was more the home office. She made her first broadcast here way back in October 1940 as a 14-year-old. She'd been evacuated from London, and she broadcast to other children to give them courage to exist away from their parents when they were evacuated because of the Blitz. It was a place where she was very happy. She used to go to the Royal Horse Show here every year. She would watch the polo over in the polo park there and watch Prince Charles and others play polo. It was also, of course, a place of great sadness for her. We had the fire here in 1992, and of course, in April of last year, it was where Prince Philip passed away. Over the next few days and hours, just like at Buckingham Palace there, we're expecting hundreds, possibly thousands of people to come and lay their flowers and pay their respects. It all began last night, and my colleague, Fergal Keane, met some of those who came to Windsor.
The signal of an ending, in the place so close to her heart, and in whose heart she was beloved.
What are you feeling?
Wow, it's just hit me. It really has, and I think it's going to hit everybody in this town, but not only here, all over the world. You know, she was a grandmother, she was a mum, she's part of my life, she's part of my mum's life, my late father's life, everybody.
As the news filtered out across the town, there was comfort in gathering together, to absorb, to reflect.
It's very sad. I think everyone's just come to pay their respects because she's such an amazing woman. It's just very sombre mood in Windsor, really.
And what did she represent to people of your generation?
A guiding light, a moral code, how to conduct yourself, how to act, you know, what's right and what's wrong.
And she was such a special lady. Like, she was so lovely and so cute and so warm, and I think she just won everyone's heart. Like, even with my daughter, she said, I really want her to live to 100. She's been saying that to me for the last few years. And she's just part of our life, really. She was a part of our life, especially living local as well.
The sense of royal continuity is not broken by death. But the Queen's example of resilience in the face of adversity will be missed.
She's had terrible moments throughout her reign of things that have happened that she's had to deal with. And she's just done a really, I think she's done just a good job, and she said it would be for her life, for the length of her life, and that's what it's been.
Amir Bukhari was getting calls from relatives in Pakistan who'd heard the news. He runs a cafe beside Windsor Castle.
No words actually to express my emotions. It's really sad.
What did she mean to you?
She was really, really important. It's not only me, it's around the world. Everybody will feel very sad, very down, very depressed. Yes, and for us, she was a neighbor, and we feel more.
No matter how long anticipated, the end has crystallized loss. The passing of a monarch who symbolized to people the best of their nation, of themselves. Their queen gone, their mourning just begun. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Windsor.
Well, Fergal Keane there were just some of the voices of some of the people who have been passing through Windsor in the past few hours. I myself have been down to Cambridge Gate, which is just a few hundred yards in that direction on the other side of the castle, and the flowers are starting to form there, as well as some very poignant notes. One or two I read said, thank you for your service. Another note read, we have you in our prayers. And a third note said, our condolences to the royal family. As John was saying earlier, people seem to want to respond to this. Many of them perhaps don't know why, but they just don't feel as though they can absorb this in their homes. They feel as though they want to go out and be at the scene of where these momentous events are taking place. What happens next? Well, we will hear an address, as you've been saying, from King Charles later. As for Windsor, well, it's anticipated, Buckingham Palace haven't confirmed anything yet, but it's anticipated this will be the final resting place for the Queen in the King George VI Memorial Chapel, which is part of the St George's Chapel. Prince Philip himself is already buried in the Royal Vault here in St George's Chapel, and it's expected, if these plans do come to fruition, that he will be moved and laid to rest alongside the Queen. But Those are matters yet to be confirmed by Buckingham Palace over the course of the next few days. All these kinds of details will be put in place. Those are the wider, the strategic decisions that have to be taken. But as Fergal and as John, as we've been seeing from here, this is also very much a personal matter. The people of this kingdom and many people from abroad simply want to come and pay their respects and their condolences to this remarkable woman.
Duncan, I think you may have mentioned a moment ago about some of the messages you've read, of flowers that have been left where you are as well. Just in terms of practicalities, there are people gathering. I know there were some people there yesterday as well, but clearly not close to the castle itself. How are things being managed? How are people being helped if they want to go and pay their respects?
There are a lot of security people here, a lot of Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle officials that are walking around here. I was here for the passing of Prince Philip last year, and we were asked to pass on the message of discouraging people from coming because they didn't want what they expected to be a kind of Princess Diana moment where so many flowers were put in front of Cambridge Gate, but they don't seem to be saying that this time round. Last night we saw many hundreds of people come to Cambridge Gate and indeed to the King Henry VIII gate behind me to lay flowers, and there doesn't seem to be any sense of discouraging that. Why would they? This is such a special moment for this nation. This really is the big one. This is the Queen of our country, and people want to express their ways and their emotions and their feelings in these kinds of small, intimate demonstrations of the way they thought of this woman. And that comes through bouquets, it comes through these notes that I've just been referring to, and I expect that will build in the days ahead. We've got many days of preparations and many days of mourning to come, and I think people will want to mark this in that intimate way with their families, with their partners, with their children, tourists, locals. If it's what happened in Buckingham Palace is the town end of things, you might view this as the country end of things. People will make their choice where to come to pay their respect, where to pay their condolences to the Queen, and this will be one pivotal moment, one pivotal spot where many thousands of people expected over the course of the next few days.
Duncan, for the moment, thank you very much.
Her Majesty was driven by a sense of public duty, but she was sustained by her religious faith. Among her many titles, she was the Supreme Governor of the Church of England.
Let's talk more about this with the author and historian Catherine Pepinster. Very good morning to you, Catherine. Thank you so much for your time. I just wonder, first of all, your thoughts, because a lot of people are feeling very differently than they might have imagined today. You're a historian, but what are your thoughts this morning?
Well, like probably most of the country, I do not know a time when Elizabeth II was not our Queen. She was part of the background that perhaps we sometimes took for granted. She offered that stability and continuity. But I think the thing that strikes me about her was that while she provided us with a framework, it was her faith that was her framework. One of the members of the clergy who was very close to her once told me that Christianity was the scaffolding of her life. Your intro mentioned her title of Supreme Governor of the Church of England. That was an official role. She had another title too, which is mentioned on every coin of the realm, Defender of the Faith, a title that our monarchs have had since the time of Henry VIII. And I think it's that title that really sums up what she was about. She felt a great sense of duty about her religion. She represented it, but she was imbued with it too from very early childhood. She believed most profoundly in the Christian faith. I think for most of her life it was very understated. We of course were used to seeing her at church services leading the nation, and she did have that role in the Church of England. But interestingly, in later years she spoke more explicitly about her own faith. When she gave her Christmas messages from the year 2000 onwards, she always talked about how the teachings of Christ were what she tried to follow. And she spoke again about this quite recently when she sent a message to the Lambeth Conference, the gathering of Anglican bishops around the world, where she wished them well, but she also talked about how much that faith meant to her.
Catherine, good morning to you. As well as her personal strong Christian faith, she was also very conscious of Commonwealth countries and other religions having a place, and she was very respectful of that too.
Absolutely. She was, I think, remarkably broad-minded, even very early on in her life. In 1952, when she gave her first Christmas message before her coronation in June 53, she asked that people of all faiths pray for her. And I think that was a really quite progressive thing for somebody to say in 1952, recognising the importance and significance of those other faiths for other people. And she liked to honour those faiths through the Commonwealth Day services. I think the Commonwealth helped introduce her to other faiths early on in her time as monarch. But of course, as Britain has become more diverse, those faiths have become more important in this country as well. And she often met leaders, representatives of other faiths too.
It's an important point you make, Catherine, and as we're seeing already, the tributes to her are coming from all walks of life and all religions.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's absolutely right. And I remember being at Lambeth Palace once, the London home of the Archbishop of Canterbury, for an event that marked her Diamond Jubilee, and she spoke there, and the guests were from all faiths around Britain, and she spoke about the importance of those faiths, and they clearly had a great respect for her and saw her as their queen, as much as she was linked to the Church of England by that title of Supreme Governor. She was queen for people of all faiths, and of course for those with no faith. She had that respect for them very much too.
Catherine, very good to speak to you this morning. Thank you so much for your time. That's Catherine Pevenstor, writer, author and historian.
Her Majesty wasn't just one of the most loved and respected women in the world. She was, of course, also one of the most filmed.
Here is some of the footage taken of the Queen over her 7 decades as monarch.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.